While I was at my father's funeral, my mother canceled my college tuition payment and announced my room was being given to my cousin. She smirked and said, "You're not special anymore." So I packed what I could and left in silence. 2 months later, I was standing on a stage receiving an award she was forced to present me. I'm 20, female, and just finishing my second year at UNC Chapel Hill. My mom, Sheila, 48, and my dad, Richard, divorced when I was around 14. The marriage had been disintegrating for a while, no big disgrace, just years of coldness and emotional distance that finally turned into full separation. When the divorce was finalized, I went to live with my dad full-time. There wasn't a custody battle or anything, Mom didn't fight for me. She said I belonged with him, like I was a piece of furniture. My dad was a good man. Quiet, thoughtful, a high school biology teacher who could name every tree in the woods behind our house. We lived just outside Asheville, North Carolina, in a house he inherited from his parents. Not fancy, but homey. I got my love for nature and science from him. He'd take me fishing, hiking, even to local restoration sites where he volunteered. He believed in showing, not telling. That kind of father. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when I was 19. I moved my classes online and became his caretaker. For nearly 6 months, I watched him fade, slowly and painfully. I did everything, administered meds, cleaned, fed him, helped him into bed, out of bed. Hospice nurses came in a few times a week, but I was the one by his side every hour. My mom only visited once. Just once. I was the one holding his hand when he died. I didn't cry right away. I felt, still. Hollow. Like time had stopped moving. That was in February. The funeral was held a few days later at the church where my parents got married. It was a cold morning. The kind where the wind doesn't whistle, it stings. I stood at the podium and gave the eulogy. Talked about how he taught me to love the land, the sky, and every living thing in between. People cried. My mother didn't. She stood stiffly in the second pew, arms crossed, expression unreadable. After the funeral, I went back to the house to change out of my dress and try to breathe. I hadn't seen Mom since the service. I pulled into the driveway and noticed right away that something was off. The door to the house was wide open. Not in a rush kind of way. In a people are moving in kind of way. Boxes were being carried inside. Not by strangers, but by my cousin, Isla. Isla is my mother's niece, her sister's kid. She's a year younger than me, and we were never close. In fact, we barely talked growing up. She lived in Raleigh, and from what I knew, she'd been having trouble getting her life together, as my aunt politely put it. I walked into the house, confused, still in my funeral clothes. My mother was standing by the hallway that led to the bedrooms. My bedroom. What's happening? I asked. She didn't greet me. Didn't offer a hug or a single word of sympathy. Instead, she said, "I canceled your tuition payment. Isla's moving in. She needs the space. You're not special anymore." I couldn't believe it. I asked her again what she meant. She repeated it, this time with a little smile tugging at her lips. That smug, victorious kind of smile that hits harder than any slap. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just walked past her, into the room that had been mine since I was 5. Half of it was already boxed up. Isla was sitting on the bed, looking awkward, not saying anything. I grabbed what I could. My laptop, a few clothes, a small lockbox with documents, the picture of my dad and me fishing, and the silver watch he wore every day. I took the blanket from my bed, not because I needed it, but because it still smelled like the lavender detergent he always used. No one tried to stop me. My mother watched in silence. I left without saying goodbye. The next few weeks were a blur of sleeping in a cheap motel, visiting the student assistance office on campus, and trying not to completely fall apart. I didn't have much money, but the university helped me apply for emergency housing. I got a room in a dorm and took a job shelving books at a local bookstore. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something. It gave me back some control. Emotionally, I was barely hanging on. Losing my dad, being betrayed by my mom, and trying to stay on top of schoolwork felt like drowning while pretending to breathe. I didn't talk to anyone about what happened. I didn't want pity. I just wanted to survive. Then something shifted. There was a research competition coming up, focused on environmental restoration in the Appalachian region. My professors encouraged me to enter. I wasn't sure at first, but something about it felt necessary. Like a way to honor my dad. To remind myself who I was, and what he taught me. So I poured myself into it. Late nights in the lab. Weekend fieldwork. I studied old maps, biodiversity records, conservation models. I forgot about sleep. I forgot about everything else. And then, out of nowhere, I won. Not just the category. The entire damn thing. The university invited me to an awards ceremony. A big one. With media coverage. And when I got the formal invitation in the mail, my stomach dropped. The presenter for the top award? Sheila. My mother. Apparently, she had recently been appointed to the university's board of trustees, through some donation she made or a political favor. I don't even know. The irony made me dizzy. I didn't tell anyone what happened between us. Not the professors, not the event organizers. I kept it buried, like everything else. Just showed up, ready to smile for the cameras. She didn't know I would be the one receiving the award. When she saw my name on the list, when she saw me, standing backstage with a microphone pinned to my dress, her face went pale. She handed me the plaque with visibly shaking hands. She didn't say a word. I took it, smiled, and said into the mic, "Thank you." Then I turned to the audience and began my speech. It wasn't a speech about revenge. It was about resilience. I talked about my dad. About the land he loved, and how that love became my work. I said this, to anyone who's ever been made to feel replaceable, you're not. You're worthy, you're capable, and you're never as alone as you think. When I finished, the audience stood. Not for me, but for the truth of it. Because we've all been there in one way or another. I looked over and saw her, still at the edge of the stage. She wasn't clapping. She walked off before I could even get to her. I haven't heard from her since. The days after the award ceremony felt strange. Not triumphant exactly. More like the calm after a long, cruel storm. The kind of calm where you don't know if you're resting or just waiting for another blow to come. Professors were suddenly offering to write letters of recommendation. A regional conservation group reached out and asked if I'd consider an internship that summer. One of the assistant deans even stopped me on campus to congratulate me and said, "Your story is inspiring." I smiled and nodded, like I was grateful. I was. But I also felt detached from all of it. As if they were talking about someone else. I didn't hear from Sheila. Not a text. Not a call. Nothing. But she knew. She had to know. The university posted clips from the ceremony on their social media, and my name had been mentioned in a few local newspapers. I even got a handwritten letter from a retired professor in Boone, saying she'd followed the competition for years and hadn't seen someone with that much clarity and conviction in a long time. I cried reading it. Not because of the praise, but because for the first time in months, I felt seen. Not by my mother, not by family, but by someone who didn't owe me anything. Word got back to some of the family eventually. A couple of cousins I hadn't heard from in years messaged me on Instagram to say they were proud of me. My aunt, Sheila's sister and Isla's mother, sent me a clipped email that just said, "We didn't know what really happened. I hope you're doing okay." I didn't respond. Because what was I supposed to say? That their silence when I got kicked out of my own home told me everything I needed to know? Instead, I focused on school. I accepted the internship offer with the nonprofit. It was part-time during the semester and would transition to full-time during the summer. They worked closely with land trusts and local governments across the Blue Ridge area. It was exactly the kind of work Dad used to do on weekends when no one was watching. Quiet impact. They gave me my first real project, writing an assessment on a tract of land that had been damaged by illegal dumping, figuring out how to reintroduce native plant species. I poured myself into it. Not to prove anything. Not anymore. But because it mattered to me. I spent long days out in the field with soil samples and notebooks. Came home covered in mud. Worked late into the night researching soil health and plant restoration. And for the first time since he died, I felt like he was right there with me. In the wind. In the trees. In the sound of gravel crunching under boots. Some evenings, I'd sit in the staff office alone, long after the others had gone home. I'd sip stale coffee and reread old notes from Dad. He used to jot down little observations in the margins of his field guides. Check this again in spring, or birdsong here is changing. I kept one of his books in my backpack. I didn't tell anyone about what happened with my mom. Not even my supervisor at the internship. I didn't want pity or special treatment. It was easier to pretend I had come from some normal, loving family, just another kid who liked trees more than people. But silence has weight. It builds, quietly. And eventually, it breaks in unexpected ways. One afternoon, in early April, I was back on campus to give a guest talk for a class on ecological policy. I wasn't even a guest lecturer, I was just filling in for a grad student who was sick. At the end of the session, a student came up and asked if I was the girl from the awards thing. I nodded. He grinned. That was badass, he said, and walked away. I don't know why it hit me so hard, but when I got back to my dorm, I sat on the floor and cried. Not just tears, ugly, shaking sobs that came from somewhere buried deep. It wasn't about the award or the ceremony or even my mom. It was about the fact that for the first time in a long time, I realized I had survived. It hadn't broken me. Not completely. I had walked out of that house with almost nothing, and somehow found a version of myself that was stronger. Not hardened. Just real. And I think my dad would have been proud of that. Sheila, meanwhile, remained a ghost. But not everyone stayed quiet forever. A few weeks later, I got a call from Aunt Elaine, my mother's younger sister. She was always the quieter one, more reserved. She lived up near Boone and rarely visited family events. I hadn't spoken to her since I was a teenager. I didn't answer her first call. Or the second. The third time, she left a voicemail. Hi, Marin. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. But I just want you to know I saw what happened at the awards ceremony. And I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner. I should have called when Richard died. What your mother did wasn't right. If you ever want to talk, or come up here for a weekend, the door's open. I stared at the message for a long time. It was the first time anyone from my mother's side of the family had acknowledged what happened. I didn't call back right away. I wasn't ready. But I saved the voicemail. Meanwhile, Isla had apparently moved out of the house. I only know this because one of my old high school friends still lives in the area and mentioned it in passing when we got coffee over spring break. According to her, Isla had lasted about a month living with Sheila before things blew up. Something about house rules and curfews, she said. Your mom was trying to control her like she was still 16. I just nodded and stirred my coffee. I didn't say what I was thinking, that maybe for the first time, someone else saw what I saw. Sheila always had a way of smiling in public while rotting people from the inside behind closed doors. It wasn't obvious oppress. It was control, manipulation, subtle humiliation. The kind that makes you question whether you're being dramatic or just sensitive. Gaslight through omission. When I left, she didn't yell. She didn't slam doors. She just smirked. Like I had finally made the decision she wanted me to make all along. But life didn't unfold the way she expected. And that, more than anything, is what I think really stung for her at that ceremony. The next message came out of nowhere. It was mid-May, right after finals week. I was in the middle of packing up my dorm for the summer internship when I saw the notification on my phone. From Sheila. The subject line was blank. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the notification for a full minute before I tapped it open. Marin. I don't know what you want from me. I saw the ceremony. Congratulations. I hope you understand that life has been hard for everyone, not just you. I was grieving too. You might not see it, but I did what I thought was best at the time. I'm sorry if you feel hurt. Maybe someday you'll understand. That was it. No actual apology. No ownership. Just a vague suggestion that I should understand her behavior. The way she framed my pain as a personal interpretation, if you feel hurt, told me everything I needed to know. I didn't reply. Not out of anger. Not even out of spite. Just clarity. There was no version of this story where she was the victim. No version where I could pretend her decisions were misunderstandings. She didn't just forget to care. She actively chose not to. But the message did rattle me a little. I sat with it for a while. Read it a few more times, even tried to imagine how her mind worked. I wondered if, somewhere deep down, she regretted what she did. If maybe watching me on that stage reopened something inside her that she had locked away for good. Or maybe it was just about control. A final attempt to reframe the story, as if she could reach into my reality and rewrite it with a single passive-aggressive email. I ended up forwarding it to my university therapist, someone I had started seeing for free as part of the counseling program. She read it and just said, "This sounds like someone trying to reassert control over your narrative. Not someone seeking reconciliation." That helped. It reminded me that not all bridges need rebuilding. Some just need to be left behind, quietly, for your own peace. The internship started a week later. I moved into a shared cabin provided by the conservation group. It was a little rundown, creaky floors, mismatched furniture, but I loved it. The windows opened wide and looked out onto a field where deer grazed in the early mornings. There was no TV, and the Wi-Fi barely worked, but I didn't mind. My days were filled with site visits, community meetings, and drafting restoration proposals. One of my favorite projects involved an abandoned plot of farmland that had been neglected for over 20 years. The soil was exhausted, the native flora had been replaced by invasive vines, and an old rusted pickup truck sat half-buried near a line of overgrown trees. I worked with a team to design a multi-year plan to bring the area back to life. We spent mornings mapping soil quality, afternoons planting switchgrass and milkweed, and evenings attending town hall meetings to build support for the work. It was hard, honest labor. I sweat more that summer than I had in my entire life. But it felt right. Like a second kind of mourning, one that didn't hurt as much. The land was broken. But it wasn't hopeless. And neither was I. One evening, after a long day clearing brush and hauling compost, I sat on the porch of the cabin, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The sky was that soft kind of gold that makes everything feel suspended in time. I had Dad's watch on my wrist and a cold glass of sweet tea in my hand. That's when I thought about the voicemail from Aunt Elaine again. I pulled out my phone and listened to it one more time. Her voice was soft. Hesitant, but kind. She hadn't tried to explain things away. She hadn't asked me to pretend. She just said she was sorry. And that her door was open. So I called her back. She answered on the second ring. I expected awkward silence, but she just said, "Hi, sweet girl," and I broke. We ended up talking for 2 hours. She told me how she'd always suspected something wasn't right between me and Sheila, but she didn't know the extent of it. Said she felt helpless during the divorce, especially since my mom had isolated herself from most of the family after moving out. Elaine stayed close with Isla and my other cousins, but never really with my mother. She said she regretted not reaching out after Dad's funeral. That she still remembered the way he used to bring apple butter to every Thanksgiving dinner. I asked her about Isla. Apparently, the arrangement at Sheila's house had gone south pretty quickly. She expected Isla to live under her thumb. No late nights, no guests, no job hopping, no opinions, Elaine said. Isla left after a month. Said it was like being back in middle school. I wanted to feel vindicated. But mostly, I just felt tired. Like my body was slowly releasing tension it had held since February. Elaine didn't push for more contact. She didn't suggest a family reunion or forgiveness or even healing. She just said she was proud of me. And that I deserved more than what I got. I believed her. That summer moved fast. By July, I had been offered a chance to stay on part-time during the school year with a stipend. They wanted me to help lead a community partnership program focused on educating high school students about environmental stewardship. I said yes without hesitation. That program turned out to be one of the most rewarding things I'd ever done. Not just because of the work, but because it gave me a chance to stand in front of kids who felt forgotten, overlooked, underestimated. I looked at them and saw versions of myself. And I told them what I wished someone had told me when I was 16, standing in a storm of silence: you don't have to become what they expect you to be. You can write your own ending. Some of them believed me. I could see it in their eyes. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real turning point, not the award, not the applause, not even the moment on stage with Sheila, but the quiet knowledge that I had built something of my own. That I had carved a space for myself in the world, and that it mattered. It was late September when Sheila tried again. I was back on campus, juggling classes, and the part-time work with the nonprofit. Life had a new rhythm. Quiet, busy, fulfilling. I hadn't thought about her in weeks. Not really. But then came the email, this time with a subject line. Coffee? The body of the message was short. Hi Marin, I'm going to be in Chapel Hill next week for a board meeting. Would love to see you, if you're open to it. Coffee on me. I know we didn't part on the best terms. Maybe we can talk. It was signed off casually, like we were old colleagues reconnecting. No warmth, no acknowledgement of what she'd done beyond didn't part on the best terms. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But something about the message, its tone, its timing, made me pause. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the active way. What I felt was more like detachment. I had stopped needing her to be anything. Not a mother. Not a villain. Just irrelevant. But maybe, just maybe, I could let her see what that looked like. So I agreed. We met at a little cafe off Franklin Street, the kind that catered more to professors than students. I got there early and picked a corner table with a view of the door. I wore a clean button-down, jeans, and the silver watch my dad had given me. No makeup. No mask. She walked in 5 minutes late, wearing a fitted blazer, hair styled perfectly. She looked exactly as she always had, sharp, controlled, self-possessed. She gave me a brief smile as she sat down. You look well, she said. So do you, I replied, neutral. There was a pause. She ordered a cappuccino. I already had tea. Then she launched into small talk. Asked how classes were going, if I was still doing the tree stuff. I let her speak. I didn't offer details. Just short answers. Yes. Still working. Still studying. No, I didn't need anything. Eventually, she leaned in. I've been thinking a lot about the last year, she said. I know things got tense. But I was grieving too, Marin. You have to understand that I wasn't thinking clearly. That word again, understand. I looked her in the eye and said, calmly, you were clear enough to tell me I wasn't special. She blinked. I didn't mean it like that. You said it while you were handing over my bedroom. At my father's funeral. Her jaw tightened. I was trying to help Isla. She had nowhere else to go. And I did? I asked. Another pause. She opened her mouth, then closed it. You didn't call. Not once. Not when I was in emergency housing. Not when I won that award. You stood 10 feet from me and didn't say a word afterward. I didn't want to make it worse, she said. You looked fine. I took a breath. The calm in me wasn't forced. It was earned. I am fine, I said. But not because of you. Because I had to figure everything out on my own. And you know what? I'm better for it. You gave me nothing, and I built something. She looked away, her hands tightening around her coffee cup. I thought maybe we could start over, she said quietly. That's when I realized this wasn't guilt. This was damage control. She was realizing her place in my life was gone. And she wanted it back now that it looked like I had become someone she could be proud of. Someone who might reflect well on her. But I didn't owe her anything. So I smiled. Not cruel. Not smug. Just steady. We don't need to start over, I said. I'm not angry anymore. I've moved on. So that's it? She asked, sounding almost insulted. That's it, I said. She sat back, stunned. I didn't drag her. I didn't cry. I didn't try to make her feel small. I just finished my tea, stood up, and left her there. Alone, in a cafe full of strangers who didn't know what she'd done. Just another woman sipping cappuccino, trying to rewrite history. And that? That was enough. A month later, I was invited to give a talk at a statewide environmental conference. My nonprofit submitted my work for a Young Leader Award, and I won again. It was a small ceremony. No cameras, no university board. Just other scientists, researchers, community leaders. Elaine drove down for it. After the talk, she hugged me tightly and said, "You did it, sweetheart." I smiled and looked around the room. No mother in sight. No bitter smirks. Just people who showed up because they believed in the work, and maybe, just maybe, in me. I didn't need revenge that burned bridges or broke bones. I got the kind that builds something better without them. And when I walked out of that building, under the soft Carolina sky, I knew I had already won.